The Chicago Bulls had a team building experience in which they went on the roller coaster, and I'm going to tell you why. While team building is all fine and dandy, it doesn't mean anything if what comes out of it isn't players holding each other accountable on the basketball court. We're going to talk about all that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, man. And I want to start off with this. So I'm sure most Bulls fans by now saw the pictures that came out of several Chicago Bulls players going on a team bonding experience in which they went on a roller coaster. And this is something that's happened before. Patrick Williams talked about it back in 2021, 2022, on which they did something similar. And this is great, right? Let me make no mistake about it. The team going out, doing things together, it's all fun and dandy, right? And a team going out and having experience together, much like last year when they went to Nashville together, it's all great. You want to have a team full of players that like each other, that enjoy being around each other. That's a basis, right, of a great team. But it all means nothing if you don't have players that hold each other accountable on a deeper level. The Nashville trip last year, what did it ultimately mean for the Chicago Bulls season if we really look at it and we're being honest? Nothing. Not a goddamn thing, because of the way that season went. Now, of course, we had storylines over the course of that of Kobe White and Ayo Dosunmu, and the way that they stepped up, especially while players went down with injury, and how their season ended extremely strong on what they were able to do over the course of that season. That's great, right? And that's why I think more importantly than going out and doing fun activities or even having a team that necessarily likes each other is a team that holds each other accountable. That is one of the most important things in all of this, is having teammates that when you're maybe not playing the best, right? Or uplift each other is great, but like hold each other accountable. When you make mistakes, call it out. Not in a sense of I'm calling you out because you sucked or because you did something bad, but I'm calling you out because, hey, brother, we need better out of you and we know you can be better. Hold each other accountable, not only to your own individual specific goals, but as well as the goals of the team. That is the most important part of this training camp period, is building a bond, not just in a sense of a team that likes each other, but a team that holds each other accountable. When you look at it as well, the core three players, Nikola Vucevic, DeMar DeRozan, and Zach LaVine, all seemingly really enjoyed each other off the court, right? They had a bond off the court. I think that was evident. They made sure that they talked about it, right? Even DeMar DeRozan now, since leaving, has still talked about how often he talked to Zach LaVine, even though, some people have tried to drum up that maybe there was a problem between those guys, but they liked each other. That's cool. You can have a team that likes each other, but listen, if you're not holding each other accountable on that basketball court, that is where you start, faltering at. And that's why, I've talked about through this training camp period, finding who's going to be that voice of the locker room, that voice of the team, that when the Bulls are going through the second game in 3 nights and they're getting their ass kicked, who's going to rally that team together? Who's going to step up and be that leader for the Chicago Bulls next season? And I think overall, listen, I have 2 candidates on this roster that really, I think one long-term and one now. I think Kobe White, when you looked at him, like him growing as a point guard last year, and he took on those duties as far as, being that guy that talked a little bit more. He's talked about it since DeMar's left, how he wants to step into that role and provide some leadership for the young guys and be that voice of reason. I've talked about who's going to step up as the clutch performer, and hopefully that's going to be Kobe White as well. It's hugely important to have that voice in your locker room. It's hugely important to have that leadership. But even outside of having that one voice, that one leader, having a team that is going to hold each other accountable. That's what I want. Because, listen, one thing, me and Winton kind of disagree and agree on a lot when it comes to Billy Donovan. When Patrick Williams and his development comes up, a lot of what Winton will respond with is that, well, Billy Donovan needs to use him better. And I'm not saying that that's not a true statement as well. Let me be clear. That's also true. I want to see Billy Donovan utilize his power forward position much better in the scheme. But Patrick Williams as well can find a lane, even with how Billy Donovan uses him, to still have a greater output. For example, following up shots, going after putbacks, using that athleticism, right, to get some offensive rebounds and through that, getting putbacks and finding the defense out of position to get a couple of extra buckets. Those are things that are in Patrick Williams' control within the flow of the offense that I want to see him do. And I think him growing in that area, he can go from 10 points per game to 12 to 14 points per game easily if he just does those things. Now, if you add into that Billy Donovan also utilizing him better in the offensive game plan and scheme, boy, you could be off to the races at that point. We could be talking about a 16, 17 point per game scorer in Patrick Williams. So it's both, right? But again, you have to have, because Billy Donovan is not that guy as far as the vocal leader, right? I've said it before. I've had episodes on him before. One of the things that if you don't have a true leader, when you're going through a transition period as a team, when you have that head coach, that voice rings loud and true, it helps some things. It helps areas in while you're finding that next leader, right? So Kobe White, I think, is going to step into that role. I think it's going to be important. I think also Kobe White being one of the longest tenured Bulls outside of Zach LaVine as well, he understands the city. He understands this franchise. He understands what will and won't happen, right? He's gone through enough of his role changing year after year as well with the Chicago Bulls that he can help these young players in Julian Phillips, Dalen Terry, maybe even Chris Duarte, right? Manas Busilis, who's coming in. Him and Ayo Dosunmu can help those guys as they're trying to find their way, right, to maybe crack the rotation or find how they can contribute to this team. They can be voices of reasons for those guys, and that is something that I think could definitely help this team. One of the most important things to me in this training camp period is finding an identity. This has been a Bulls team that has not had a true identity for over 3 years. We just have not had it, right? We've had glimpses of an identity. You've had things that we thought were going to become our identity that end up not maintaining through. And I think when you have it, and I said I had two pillars, right? And I'm going to get to that second one here in a second. But the first one, like I said, Kobe White. I'm really looking at Kobe White to step up in a large part in the leadership role. And to a lesser extent, Ayo Dosunmu as well. Like, Ayo is another player he's been through a lot of different roles, a lot of different places. Like, the fan base kind of turning on him after his second season just a little bit, or doubting him. Maybe doubting him is a better phrase than turning on him, right? I don't know if they've turned on him, but they doubted him a little bit. And in his third season, stepping up, right, to be an example for these younger guys that are behind him that are still trying to find their way. But the next one up is one that I think is hugely important for the future of this team, and that's Manas Busilis. And I think that Manas Busilis, the standard that he holds himself to, how he views himself, right? When you look at Busilis, one of the things outside of the flashy dunks and the blocks and things in summer league, it was his aggression level and the confidence that Manas Busilis has in himself. Now, with that level of confidence, you got to go out there and show it on the court. So I don't think anything, but long term, the attitude, the personality that Manas Busilis has, which is in a lot of ways the exact opposite of like Patrick Williams as a rookie, right? And that's, again, this is not to judge or say which way's right or different. I'm just saying how it can impact a team. Manas Busilis is coming into this Bulls locker room, and if you don't play him, he's going to try to make it the most difficult on you to not put him out there on the court because his energy, his aggression, the activity that he goes after, and like I've said, not a really good on-ball defender yet, but he is somebody who gets active in trying to be, and that's why I do have a solid hopes that he's going to be a solid, at least not a negative defender for the most part of his career. If he can turn into a plus defender with his upside, that's huge, right? But don't overlook the way that Manas Busilis can come in here and be something that provides inspiration to the Julian Phillips, to the Dalen Terrys as well, right? Busilis is not coming into the United Center quiet. He's not coming into the United Center not trying to make sure that everybody knows he wants to be one of the best guys on the court. I've talked about it before. Patrick Williams and Manas Busilis going at each other every day in practice, right? Could help jumpstart both of their next stages of their development. And I think that could be big for both of those guys. But Busilis, yeah, people label him as cocky, and I'll say this, if it does kind of lean more towards the cockiness, you got to be backing that up on the court. But Busilis being a guy like whereas Julian Phillips have been guys that have kind of been more ho-hum guys as far as, hey, listen, and that's not a bad thing. Again, I'm not saying this to judge any player on this Bulls team, but to be those guys that are more so, they're going to try to get what they can get. They're going to, talk to the team, be good guys. Busilis is coming in, and he's talking shit. The day one, I don't care if he's guarding Zach LaVine to Kobe White to Billy Donovan himself, he's talking shit. And the confidence level that Busilis has also trickles down to his teammates. Busilis isn't a guy where it always has to be him, right? But the confidence that he has, it can absolutely trickle throughout that roster as well. And I think that that's something that can also help this team find its identity, right? Help individual players kind of find their voice as well. When you have somebody who's stepping in as a rookie, 20 years old, day one, and is coming in with the level of confidence that Manas Busilis has? Listen, for a Patrick Williams that's been in this locker room now going on 4 years, for Dalen Terry that's going on to year 3, for Julian Phillips that's going into year 2, for Chris Duarte, who initially he's going into year 4 as well, but somebody who as well has had some success his rookie year, and his role has changed every year, and he's not really looked at the same after that year that people thought he was going to build off of. Listen, looking at this guy coming in here and coming at you guys every single day, that helps as well. The spirit of competition, it has to start first internally, right? And while there are some positions that are automatically going to be filled and Billy Donovan has his starters already planned out for, you can still make it interesting as far as the rotation, as far as the minutes balance. And so I think somebody like Manas Busilis, and this isn't to put anything on him for him to be a leadership role or anything. I just think Busilis being who he is as a person is going to help a lot of the other players find their voice as well, because somebody like that it forces some development out of some guys, because you're looking there saying, hey, listen, who's this rookie, right? And that was something that Joakim Noah as well, reported with his confidence and getting into it with Ben Wallace and things like that his rookie year. Like, and you saw how that developed over the course of his career. Like, yeah, he got a little quiet after being a rookie. The team voted on to suspend him for 1 game or whatever. But then he turned into one of the most vocal leaders on that team. Now, he wasn't the best player on that team. That was Derrick Rose. I'm not. That's why I said I'm not putting the expectations for Manas Busilis to all of a sudden in year 1, year 2, or even year 3 to be the best player on this team. But I think having guys with the mentality of a Manas Busilis, and especially if he does succeed and people see him, hey, listen, I played 18 minutes total my rookie year. Busilis is coming in, and he's played more than that this first month. Look at what that motivates guys. And so I think you have Kobe White, who's been through what he's been through this season. Ayo Dosunmu as well, who's been through what he's been through his career. Those guys being kind of the pillars of your next wave of leadership for this Bulls team. And then you got a guy like Manas Busilis with his mentality and mindset as well there, coming up in the wings, growing through this team as well. This team may be on the path to finally start finding some of that identity. And I think that's the thing. When you don't have necessarily a skill, a certain level of constant talent, of constant of performance, having an identity goes far in every major sport. And so, especially in basketball, where your guys are playing offense and defense, they're on the court, those type of things. Like, this Bulls team finding an identity this season is hugely important. And I don't want to overlook that importance, but you guys can let me know what you guys think down below. With that said, I want to get into this Bleacher Report article. So Bleacher Report had an article in which they were giving one-word answers to describe every team's offseason. And for the Bulls, they said half measures. That was, even though half measures is 2 words, if you hyphenate it, is it 1 word? Nonetheless, right? So they listed it as half measures. And so the question that I want to throw here and the conversation that I want to have built around this is that they're not wrong. Now, I've said this before. The Bulls are still trying to live in 2 worlds. And I don't think that that's anything that too many people are going to disagree with, right? They're still hoping that maybe this team can exceed and the young players can step up enough to where you're at that point still competing for a play-in. But if it doesn't, they're prepared to go younger, bet on development, right? And, somebody asked a great question based off last video. They said, well, even if we're seeing Billy Donovan is not that guy, that's why it's important to know what the roles of the assistant coaches that we're having in here come. And that's where I think looking at what the moves that the Bulls did with the roster, right? They didn't necessarily go full rebuild with young guys. They got rid of DeMar DeRozan. They got rid of Alex Caruso. They kept Zach LaVine. They kept Nikola Vucevic. So literally half of your veterans left, half of your core stayed, right? You still got, of course, veterans like Torrey Craig, who I'm not labeling as part of the core, being here with only 1 season. You still got guys like Javon Carter here, things like that, right? So you didn't go completely young. You have gone younger. You have kind of retrofitted your timeline around Josh Giddey, Kobe White, Manas Busilis, Ayo Dosunmu, Patrick Williams, these young guys, right? But you didn't do enough for your team to necessarily be looked at as in the Cooper Flag sweepstakes per se. Now, I've said it many times before. I get it. Cooper Flag is labeled as the get in this draft, but there are some players that I think that you can get later in this draft that can help your team hugely. Hugo Gonzalez. I can't remember who first mentioned him. Maybe it was my brother Corn. But listen, the more and more tape I watch on this guy, I'm telling you, he could end up being one of the steals in this draft. I firmly believe that. But not even saying that that's who I necessarily want the Bulls to draft if they, still stay in the top 10. We'll get to that as we go through the season. But by the way, while I'm talking about that, Let me know if you guys would like, because I'm doing one thing over on Chicago Sky Central during the offseason because I can focus on women's college basketball. I was going to do a power ranking of draft prospects for the Sky. Would you guys like, as part of maybe the Sunday mailbag, an updated power ranking throughout the collegiate season of players that I think that should be in the top 10 of the Bulls draft board and maybe how they perform that week? Let me know what you guys think on that. I'm kind of kicking around ideas for new content here. Let me know what you guys think on that. But I think saying half measures with the way that you can view it is true. But I think when you also look at the fact that the Bulls went out and got Dan Craig, they got Wes Unseld Jr. These are two guys who I've said a lot have been heads of player development for the Denver Nuggets, for the Miami Heat, and they developed players like Jokic, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., Tyler Hero, like Bam Adebayo, right? These guys have developed guys that have really, really developed in the NBA. And I think that those, you're looking at how that can translate to some of the players that we have over here. So while, yes, with the roster, the Bulls have made half measures, I think when you look at the totality of moves that they made for the franchise, establishing a player development department, right? Getting that established last year, that Ayo Dosunmu, Kobe White talking about how the player development department has helped them last season. We've now gone out and keep in mind, the player development department, it sends players tapes, those type of things, but then you went out and got 2 lead assistants that have been heads of player development that are going to be traveling with the team day in and day out because the player development department doesn't always travel with the team. That's another thing to show that you've bet on this player development aspect of your franchise, and I like that. I don't look at that as a half measure, but as far as what your goals are of your season, yes, the Bulls are still living in 2 different places. Anybody who's been paying attention, I think, would agree with that. That's where the Bulls sit right now, and I think seeing how that develops over this season and how the Bulls' success or failure kind of controls and informs the next pivot by AK and Eversley if they make one. One thing that we know about AK and Eversley as well, they kind of stick to a path even when they could zig or zag. They kind of stay down to it, and we hope that they've learned from those mistakes. But they're still there, right? So that's another thing that we're looking to see what the next phase is like that for the Chicago Bulls. So that's something to look out for as well. But ultimately, it comes down to this, guys, and I'll say this. Yes, the Bulls still sit in 2 different places, but I think that picture is going to materialize a little bit more depending on how this season goes. Now, one last thing in how this season goes. Yesterday, I talked about, or I think it was yesterday, maybe it was Saturday, about the Bulls and who's going to be the leading scorer, those type of things, and who is going to, kind of be out there with the bench unit more. And so as much as I'm not always a guy who's a fan of this guy's writing, I got to give him credit. Again, Joe Cowley wrote up an article asking who's going to be the stagger guy for the Chicago Bulls team, because that is another role left by DeMar DeRozan. He's usually the guy who was staggered with that bench unit. Zach LaVine did it a little bit. Kobe did it a little bit at times as well, but the person that he went to over the last 3 seasons more so than any to stagger the minutes with that bench unit was DeMar DeRozan. Now, he did that because of the bench unit not always having a big-time scorer coming off of it. So DeMar had the ability to be that guy who can put up big points, get to the free throw line, but also he facilitated enough to put the guys in those positions. So who's going to be that stagger guy? Is it going to be Kobe? Is it going to be Zach LaVine? I even think that Josh Giddey has an opportunity to be that, depending on how well Ayo Dosunmu scoring off the bench, and maybe even Manas Busilis and Jalen Smith as well. That's going to be the question there, is who's going to be the stagger guy to stagger their minutes and play some with that second unit. And maybe Vooch in a bit of a way as well if he ends up being that starter, but I'm looking at those 3 guys mainly. Kobe, Zach, and Josh Giddey. And here's the reasons why, right? Let's talk about the reasons why and against each one of these players. First up, Josh Giddey, right? Of course, his ability to facilitate, his ability to get the team out in transition. We've talked a lot about how that bench unit has more guys that are going to thrive in transition. And so Josh Giddey's ability to do that, helping Ayo Dosunmu, allowing Ayo Dosunmu to be more of the shooter-slasher that he became last season. But even though Ayo Dosunmu was a really good guy in transition as well, maybe they can share some of the ball-handling duties. The problem with that is that it does rely on Modest, Ayo, or Jalen Smith turning into a solid enough scorer because, again, Josh Giddey's first role, the first thing that he's looking to do isn't necessarily scoring, even though he can do that if you get to the mid-range, if you get towards the rim as well. So I think Josh Giddey has that opportunity. Next up, Kobe White. Much like with the same things of Josh Giddey, that he can do ball handling. He's solid in transition. He's better defensively, and he's a bigger time scorer than what Josh Giddey is. That is why he could be that stagger. And the chemistry already there with Ayo Dosunmu. We know what they can be as a backcourt. together. They have a nice balance between the offense and defensive angle between those guys. So there's a story to be told there, as well as Kobe White being the stagger guy. Now, one of the questions with Kobe is that would that put him kind of more, I think one of the reasons he would thrive is that's kind of more how the team played last season when DeMar and guys went down. So there's that opportunity for Kobe White to be that stagger guy as well. And I think it really comes down to how much Kobe grows as a scorer off ball. Because Ayo did some of the ball handling when he was out there with Kobe as well last year. And I think that's something big to look at. The chemistry that's already there between those guys, the rest of the bench unit, in the Julian Phillips, in the Jalen Smiths, in the Manas Bulsl, who I think are going to be guys outside of Ayo who are going to be high up on getting those minutes. That's going to be important as well. And I know people are going to say, well, what about Lonzo Haize? But right now, until Lonzo's cleared, and even then with the minutes restriction, I think Lonzo has the game where he can fit in with anybody. So I don't really think out of the three guys that I'm mentioning, maybe Josh getting to see how those guys balance between, that may be the more difficult fit, but I'm not really worried about that right now. Let's wait till Lonzo's cleared, right? So Kobe White, because of his scoring, because of his passing, because of also the leadership role that he's growing into, and the clutch factor. He is the other guy who was the best clutch scorer for the Bulls last season. Maybe you look at Ayo there. And then lastly, Zach LaVine. Now, Zach, for a lot of reasons, right? If he can get back to being the 50, 40, almost 90 player that he was before, as well as Zach LaVine can facilitate some. You don't want him to do a whole lot of it in clutch time. That's where the turnovers start coming around at. And he's the most well-rounded scorer on the Bulls roster right now. He's a more well-rounded scorer than Kobe White. He just is. It is what it is, right? As of right now. Now, that Kobe could very well change that in the first week of the season. But right now, on paper, Zach LaVine's a more well-rounded scorer. When you look at the bench unit as well, you got guys like the Jalen Smith, the Ayo who should help provide some defensive ability around a guy like Zach LaVine. And then Manas Bulsl could thrive in getting out in transition with a guy like Zach as well. So, it's those type of things. And I think that each guy has a case to be the stagger guy. And, maybe somebody says, no, maybe it's going to be P. Will, or should be P. Will. Maybe it should be Vooch, right? Let me know who you guys think should be this guy who staggers their minutes and plays some with that bench unit for the Chicago Bulls next season. Yeah, let me know what you guys think on that. Like, I presented three guys. I presented the arguments for those three guys. But I want to hear from you guys on arguments that you can make for somebody else, or if you even arguments you can make for some of the guys that I pointed out as well. Let me know that. But that's my time for today. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. BullCentralPod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that's thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.